Is what you're eating making you anxious? For me, the answer to that was yes. I used to eat a lot of foods that made me feel sick, and that made me anxious. But it took a while for me to find the connection between the two. Today on Stepping Out of Stuck, we're going to look at this question. Is what you're eating making you anxious?
Welcome to the YouTube show, Stepping Out of Stuck. I'm your host, Ted Simmons, the superhero of shyness.
And I'm your host, Bonnie Brindle, the Anxiety Avenger.
And together we
Help you.
to get unstuck.
So let's get after it.
So you mentioned something about food making you feel anxious.
Yeah, I did. And actually, this is such a big subject for me, Ted, that in my book, Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code, chapter 6 is called Guts, and it's entirely on this subject. Uh, Having a debilitating anxiety disorder, like I did, can come from a lot of different sources. But one of them that I didn't know was that I have celiac sprue, an allergy to gluten, not just a slight sensitivity, an actual allergy to it. And I started out being seen by the medical community as a 20-year-old for IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, because I had a lot of gut issues, bloating, cramping, nausea, constipation, and I had had some of that all my life, but it came to a head about at the age of 20. And I went through testing, let's just say it was unpleasant. Testing from the bottom up and from the top down. Glucose tolerance tests, barium enemas, barium drinks, oh, you name it. It was horrible. And it wasn't until 20 years after that, at the age of 40, that it was suggested to me that I see a gastroenterologist for a test for celiac. It changed my life completely.
Mm.
Yeah, I got off of gluten and most of my symptoms went away. But those symptoms of eating foods that were bad for my body made me more anxious because I never felt good. And I'm
Oh,
wondering, right? I'm wondering if people might connect this, how what we eat could make us anxious, because it definitely was true for me. Have you had
mhm.
any experience like that?
Oh my gosh. This last couple of weeks, I started eating um what would I call it? Junk food or cheap food?
Yum.
And things like ramen, the high school or the college diet, um, eating ramen, basically, it's pure white flour, right, in noodle form. And what happens is that turns directly into sugars,
Mhm,
especially white flour turns directly into sugars,
mhm.
and that creates spikes in our energies, right? And that was something that was happening to me. I was getting these weird spikes. Um, that combined with the fact that I didn't feel like I had enough energy, and so I went into the trap of drinking something like an energy supplement.
Oh, yeah. Because all that sugar, it'll spike you, but you crash
Right.
too, right? You don't
Yeah.
stay up there. Just okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's those things like caffeine and other things like that. Basically, all accelerated everything together, and then I felt extra anxious. I
Ugh.
just couldn't get my heart to slow down. I couldn't get my stomach to unclench. I couldn't get the all these things, and I felt like all the walls were falling in on me. And it wasn't until I sat and thought about it that I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's what I'm eating." And it was your story in your book that really helped me relate that again. And Yeah, I have to thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so glad it was helpful. Yay.
Yeah.
Kind of embarrassing to write about, frankly, but I did
Well, yeah.
because I know other people are struggling with that.
Something I don't know if I told you, but I went through several sessions of doing that myself. Um, I had the barium up and down, the and other things like that, and all they could tell me was that I had some kind of reflux of some sort,
Mhm.
and that was it. They didn't they didn't equate it to diet. So yeah, I mean, we've both done self-discovery things on, what do we do with food to make sure that we feel better?
Yes, we both have, and we both feel better.
Yep.
Mhm. You know, when I think about that and all the time that I spent trying to get better, how the level of anxiety that eating improperly created for me was hard to even imagine. That like it was hard for me to believe that what I was eating was the problem because I'd never been a really big junk food eater. Like, as a kid in high school, yeah, McDonald's drive-through once in a while, whatever. But like now, I mean, you could name 5 fast food joints that people frequent that I've never actually even been to. I ate good food at home as far as my parents had a huge vegetable garden, so there was always a lot of fresh food being prepared in my house. And I'm just not a big candy kind of person except for dark chocolate, which is a subject for another episode. Um, but I thought, I eat way better than most people I know. I could say that since I was 20 years old, and it's certainly true today. Most people I see around, I eat a lot better. Not a lot of junk, not a lot of candy, not a lot of processed food at all. And it's interesting to find you could still struggle. So even beyond the time that I just described for in my early 20s when I went through all that testing, even beyond that, there's a there's a time to look at our then what is sold to us. Okay, let me pull this together. What is sold to us by big business as food that is not food, that has no nutritional value whatsoever, and a lot of chemicals. And you mentioned ramen, which made me laugh to myself because most people I know have been in the ramen stage, and I certainly was in it for a while, and man, did I feel bad. The last thing I needed to eat was a lot of white flour, right, all the time, and, bread and whatever that goes along with it. But we are being sold products on the shelves with flashy colors and, funny animals and pictures and stuff on them to attract kids especially, that are not food, and they're mostly chemical. And, like, even when I look at an instant noodle soup from an organic company compared to, like, a Maruchan ramen, which is, like, the chemical list is this long, I think, "Oh, we're giving this to kids." And, you mentioned caffeine. I can't tell you how many people I know who struggle with being like this a lot, kinda that type A, constant edge, and they use caffeine. I'm like, "Just quit the caffeine. It'll change everything." But
Oh yeah.
a lot of people don't believe it's true. And like you said, that really got your mind going and gave you a tight feeling in your gut. All right. Just letting go of that. And so many people think, oh, I got to have caffeinated coffee in the morning to get myself going for work or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And it does replace, right? When we use caffeine all at time, it replaces the body's already available energy system that gets going in the morning when we wake up in the sunlight and we move and we drink water. Um, but yeah, it's something I wanna help people look at a little more closely because, like you, eating the wrong foods made me really anxious, and beyond the change in my diet around celiac, I've also done nutritional testing on other specific foods that I never would have guessed were a problem for me that are, and I avoid them, and food doesn't make me anxious anymore.
Yeah. Well, I just did a big, huge weight loss journey. Um, that it was, my mom had cancer, and she was in the hospital, and so I decided that I needed to change what I did for myself,
Mm,
change my health.
mhm.
And so I found a functional medicine doctor. He was in one of my networking groups, um, and part of the Wellness Way. And he basically did a blood test or did several blood tests, and we found that there was a blood allergy thing to certain foods, and those were the foods that I was eating.
Yeah, me too.
And
Me too.
yeah, and I thought I was eating healthy because I was eating things like peanut butter and, you know, I was, you lettuce, tomatoes, other things like that, and salads, and everything. But it turned out that my blood was reacting negatively. It was inflaming to tomatoes, lettuce,
Oh.
wheat, um, and other things like that. And it was basically that was causing me to puff up. And yeah, once I stopped that, I
Mhm.
lost something like 20 pounds.
Wow.
And I had brain fog, my brain fog kinda cleared up, and, um, plus a few other things of changing, diet into, um, more unprocessed foods, more raw type foods,
Mhm.
that definitely made a big, huge difference. But not something that everyone can do, right?
No, but something everyone can do is experiment with cutting
Yeah.
out certain foods, and see, because like you, I've done the nutritional testing by blood test as well and
Mhm.
found things I never would have guessed, like eggs and almonds and
Yeah.
bananas I
Yeah.
shouldn't be eating.
Yeah.
Um, but we can test ourselves by removing things that we eat fairly frequently and take
Mhm.
them out for 30 days and see if we feel better.
Okay.
That's a slower way, but it's an effective way, and it's a no extra cost way to figure out if there are foods that are causing inflammation. So, like what you were holding on to, right? Your body was holding on to inflammation, right? As well as if you were eating some things, you had more body fat than you needed, but the inflammation gave you that puffy feeling you described,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so I'm so glad you went to a functional physician to figure that out.
Yeah. It was, um it was eye-opening,
It certainly is.
because I thought that I thought that I was eating really, everyone said, "Oh, you eat so healthy, you're so good, you're everything." And then to find out that, um, no, what I was eating was actually affecting me still.
Negatively, yeah, and so
Yeah.
lettuce and tomato are my friends, and they're great
Right?
for me, right? So
Yeah.
the lesson we can take from this is that the foods that are right for you are individual, right? My husband can eat bananas all day. I can't touch them, and so it's all individual. And a hidden rule that comes up for me around this from the past,
Mhm.
which is the reason it took 20 years for me to figure out what was going on and what I needed, is that generally we are taught to follow doc in the regular medical establishment. Functional is different. The regular medical establishment, we're taught to follow doctor's orders. Doctor says this has got to be right. For me, had I done more exploration outside of the medical establishment to figure out, I probably would have come to a conclusion a lot sooner and gotten the care that I need sooner than if I was just, okay, I need this test. Oh, it's not that. I need that test. It's not that. I could keep myself going around in circles doing that for years, and I did, and not figuring out what was wrong. So a hidden rule for me at the time was to follow the doctor's orders as given, and that's not how I do things anymore.
I would say that a hidden role for me was I was constantly seeking out, uh, things to make me feel up,
Oh.
and, things to make me feel better, things to that. And I think that's something that everyone feels, is that they want something that makes them feel better.
Mm,
sometimes not taking something, not doing something actually makes you feel better.
Yeah.
And so, like, not drinking that energy drink, not drinking that extra cup of coffee because you need that, you're trying to accelerate up to that feeling that you used to have.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
you're not gonna have that you with any of these addictive,
They're
things.
drugs. Caffeine is a drug.
Yeah, you don't get that that high anymore. You don't get that energy anymore. And sometimes just letting it go, will get you to that baseline, and that baseline is what you really want.
And allowing your body to reset itself, to move your own energy forward by getting up
Yeah.
in the morning, getting outdoors when the sun is up, moving your body, hydrating. Your natural energy will come from that, but we really suppress it with like you described with like coffee, caffeine, and the energy drinks like Monster and that kind of thing that are really attractive to kids. Um,
Mhm.
as an educator, when I would see kids at their lockers drinking that stuff, I thought, "Oh, goodness," which is creating an addiction to the up like that you're talking about, right? And that
Yeah.
becomes more dangerous later when other possible addictions show up in life. But a takeaway from here, that I wanna leave our listener with is, uh, doctors are educated people who can help us when we are ill or not feeling well and help us explore um, ways to get better. And they are also limited in their scope. So if you are feeling uncomfortable and you're realizing that maybe some of the foods you're eating are actually attributing to your anxiety, do some reading, do your own research, talk to other people who might be struggling with that and find out what methods they've used. And if you think maybe some of those foods that you eat frequently are causing some of this for you, try dropping 3, 4 different things at once for up to 30 days and then add them in one at a time and see how you feel. We can experiment that way to find out what foods are good or maybe are detrimental to us.
I like that.
And so, dear listener, we appreciate you being here today. We hope this has been helpful. And we would like to ask you to please like, subscribe, and comment. We love hearing from you when something that we have brought to the show has touched you in some way or made you think about something new. And we also love your questions. If you send us questions through the comments, we can answer them on another episode coming up. So thanks for being here.